In the heart of a seemingly ordinary suburban neighborhood, the type of neighborhood where lawns are neatly trimmed, mailboxes line up in perfect order, and neighbors exchange polite smiles while walking their dogs, one might think that life is peaceful and predictable. But appearances can be deceiving. Sometimes the most dangerous secrets are hidden behind the most ordinary doors, and the people who seem the most ordinary may harbor the most extraordinary darkness. This is the story of a neighborhood feud that escalated into a tragedy so shocking it captured national attention. It is the story of AJ Owens, a mother of four, and her neighbor Susan Lorincz, a woman who, to most people, appeared calm, composed, and above all, perfect. AJ Owens lived in Ocala, Florida, a town that many considered quiet and unassuming, the kind of place where everyone knows each other's names and life follows a predictable rhythm. AJ, a mother of four children, was known by her neighbors as kind, attentive, and someone who always looked out for her family. Her children played in the yard, laughed in the streets, and she maintained a home that exuded warmth and familiarity. Just a few steps away lived Susan Lawrence, a woman described by some as polite, organized, and in every outward sense, the embodiment of the perfect neighbor. She maintained her lawn immaculately, waved politely when people passed by, and kept to herself. To any casual observer, Susan was harmless, a model resident in the quiet suburban tableau. But behind closed doors, tensions were quietly building. AJ's children, energetic and playful, often ran and played in the yard. They made noise, laughing, shouting, and playing games in the afternoons and evenings. And while most neighbors accepted this as a normal part of life, Susan saw it differently. She began to complain, first quietly, then more frequently. She started recording the children, documenting every sound, every movement, and called the police repeatedly. From minor grievances to what some neighbors would later describe as harassment, Susan's complaints began to paint a picture of escalating obsession. Over the months and years, the neighborhood began to notice subtle changes. What once seemed like ordinary suburban life now carried an undercurrent of unease. AJ tried to maintain a cordial relationship, attempting to address Susan's complaints politely. But the frequency and intensity of the complaints only increased. Neighbors would later recall seeing AJ approach Susan's front door numerous times, always hoping for resolution, always trying to prevent conflict, yet each interaction seemed to escalate tension. Susan's calls to the authorities became almost ritualistic. Every minor noise, every small disturbance, became evidence for her claims. Her frustration and hostility grew, and neighbors whispered about the increasingly tense atmosphere. AJ's family, meanwhile, continued their life as best as they could, trying to shield the children from the growing hostility. Yet it was becoming clear that the situation was moving beyond ordinary neighborhood disagreements. This was becoming something darker, more dangerous. On the fateful day of June 2nd, 2023, AJ decided that enough was enough. After yet another complaint regarding her children, she made the decision to go to Susan's front door, to confront her neighbor directly, to resolve what had been simmering for years. She likely had no idea that this single decision would lead to a catastrophe that would shock the entire community, and eventually the nation. As AJ walked down the familiar pathway to her neighbor's house, the sun casting long shadows across the manicured lawns, there was an almost tangible tension in the air. Neighbors would later describe the day as eerily quiet, with a heavy stillness that seemed to foreshadow the events about to unfold. As AJ approached the front door, Susan had already taken steps that would ensure no ordinary conversation could take place. According to reports, she called 911, claiming that she felt threatened. Within moments, an unthinkable act of violence occurred. Susan fired a gun through the locked front door, striking AJ. She fell in the doorway, lifeless, in front of one of her children, who was reportedly present during the incident. The neighborhood erupted in chaos. Police arrived shortly afterwards, securing the scene, but the damage had already been done. What had begun as a mundane conflict between neighbors had escalated into a deadly confrontation, leaving behind a grieving family and a community in shock. Witness accounts and 911 call recordings later revealed the tension and fear present in the moments before the shooting. Susan claimed self-defense, but the accumulation of months, even years, of harassment, recordings, and aggressive behavior painted a different picture. This was not a spontaneous act of panic. This was the tragic culmination of a slow-burning conflict that had gone unchecked for far too long. Susan Lorincz was arrested and charged with manslaughter. During the trial, evidence emerged documenting years of escalating harassment, the repeated calls to law enforcement, and the persistent tension between the two families. The prosecution argued that the killing was avoidable, a tragedy born not of an immediate threat, but of a prolonged pattern of hostility that Susan had fostered. The jury considered every piece of evidence: the police reports, the recordings, the witness testimonies. Ultimately, they rejected Susan's claim of self-defense. She was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 25 years in prison. The case sent ripples across the nation. News outlets covered it extensively, social media users debated the nuances of neighborhood disputes, and public discourse focused on the dangers of escalating conflicts, gun safety, and the hidden complexities that can exist behind the facade of a perfect neighbor. Families everywhere were reminded of the potential consequences of failing to address tension and aggression before it reaches a critical point. The story became a cautionary tale, illustrating that even in the most peaceful-seeming communities, tragedy can strike when communication breaks down and hostility is left unchecked. A quiet suburban street, a mother who only sought to protect her children, a neighbor who appeared perfect but whose actions revealed a hidden darkness, and a tragic ending that left an entire community grappling with grief and questions. This case serves as a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that unresolved conflict can spiral out of control, and that the most ordinary settings can hide extraordinary danger. Every neighborhood has its secrets, every community has tensions, and every interaction carries the potential for escalation, sometimes with irreversible consequences. As we reflect on this story, we are reminded to look beyond surface appearances, to address conflicts before they escalate, and to recognize that tragedy often arises not from a single moment, but from a series of choices made over time. This was the true story of AJ Owens and her so-called perfect neighbor, a story that will haunt this quiet neighborhood for generations.